Hello and welcome to this week's special podcast on the God Wars Dungeon 2, a preview. And with me here today I have...
I'm Mod Matthe, QA analyst for The Watch.
Mod Ollie, I'm product owner and senior content developer for The Watch.
I'm Mod Avatar, content developer on The Watch.
I'm Mod Stuo, animator for The Watch.
So we have what, about half The Watch here?
Yes.
And God Wars Dungeon is your thing?
Pretty much.
It is. We've been working on it for probably three months now, and obviously all super passionate about it. It's our kind of like crowning jewel update.
It's your baby.
It is, yeah. Mod Ramen has actually described it as his baby before.
Damn straight.
It's the biggest thing we've worked on since Raids.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah. It's a lot of people excited in the office with the artwork that's been going up in the office and sneak previews and things. There's a lot of excitement around the place.
Yeah, like a sequel to God Wars comes with a lot of expectation and a lot of hype from players and staff alike.
Well, God Wars Dungeons are still massively played. It's one of the main places people go to grind.
To start learning how to PVM, yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the first places I went. Remember hosting Bandos Masses back in the day.
So, what is, although hopefully most of our listeners will know this already, but just in case, what is God Wars Dungeon 2?
Well, it's the sequel to God Wars Dungeon 1, basically. Like, I mean, that's it. No, but in everything, like we looked at God Wars Dungeon 1 and we tried to really make a proper sequel and get that experience again with new content.
So yeah, the things we've taken from it are, 4 factions representing 4 gods, all fighting in an eternal battle. They've each got a general, which the players have to go and kill, and they drop this real sort of prestigious gear that people will really want to get. And we've obviously built on that, but those are the sort of core elements.
Those are the core elements.
And also kill count, because kill count's a big part of the first one, but we've been very careful to make sure everything we've taken, we've improved it in some way or built upon it.
Okay. So where will players find the God Wars Dungeon? So when the release is made, where will they need to go?
Cool. So players can find the entrance to the dungeon to the west of Nada, the north of the Agility Pyramid, and just below Polnevich, if I said that correctly. But if players have completed the Tales of the God Wars, they can use the tablets they got to teleport straight in.
Okay, we'll get to Tales of the God Wars in a minute, I think.
Yeah.
It's marked on the world map as the hearts. So you'll see in, obviously, like in all the advertisements and marketing and stuff, we're calling it God Wars Dungeon 2.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows then it's the sequel to God Wars. But in-game, it's called the Heart of Gielinor. Because that's the name of the dungeon and the anima source that's hidden within.
Okay. And a number of players will probably have been there quite a lot recently.
Yep.
With the efforts to open the portal.
Yeah, and build the statues around the outside.
Okay. So how do players do it? What do they need to have ready to go in? Are there any requirements? Things like that.
So we've not got any requirements to actually enter.
Right.
Entering and exploring the new area in the Heart of Gielinor, this huge cavern underneath the desert. There's no actual requirements of going in there. It's probably wise to sort of be around sort of 80s in combat skills. Stuff in there. There are aggressive armies in there that will fight you. So if you go in there a bit too low level, you might struggle a little bit. So we've got the main area that we have that's like God Wars 1. We've got this battlefield, this war zone that Mod Matthe did a lot of work on. We've got these dynamic war zones that are going on, so you've got the different factions can sort of push and pull around the dungeon and take control of different areas.
It's a battle ebbs and flows.
Yeah, so all of the 4 factions have their sort of their forces, their minions in the dungeon, and they're all kind of fighting back and forth over the different areas, and players can go in there and they can sort of help their favourite factions or the factions that they want to get specific rep with to sort of push towards various areas of the dungeon. And there's kind of cool like mini bosses and stuff related to the different factions that players can spawn in and stuff. It's quite cool. It's a lot more dynamic, there's a lot more going on. It's not just sort of NPCs just kind of dumped in there for flavour. There's some real mechanics going on this time round.
Okay, so when I first enter, what's the first thing I should do? What should I be doing first?
Well, just to jump back to requirements for a second.
Right, okay.
So each boss has its own requirement to be able to fight it.
Right.
So you've got the Zamorak one, which is the Twin Furies, requires 80 ranged. You've got Grigorovich, who's Sliska's general. He requires 80 prayer. And then you've got Helwyr, Saren's general, who requires 80 magic. And Vindicta and Gorvek, who are Zaros's general, and that is 80 attack to be able to do that.
Right, okay.
And generally you want to be wearing sort of tier 80 gear to be able to do those fights comfortably. Or, well, not comfortably the first few times. We hope people will die a little bit, but yeah, they'll get them comfortably sort of after a little while. So what was your question that you asked after that?
It was
first thing to do.
First things to do when I arrive.
Yeah. Do you want to take that away, Mod Matthe?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is sort of going to pick a boss to go with.
Right.
Not really going to pay attention to much around the dungeon. I'm just going to get my KC, go to my boss, and see what it's all about.
Okay.
So for me, that would probably be the Zamorak boss, the Twin Furies.
Nice, I like it. Good choice.
Just because they're my waifus.
Yeah, they're your waifus.
Cheating on Nex.
Yeah, I thought Nex is going to be unhappy. Come on.
Yeah, it's all good.
I think the first thing I would do once I get in there is the first area you get into, you have the different reputation vendors.
Yeah.
So you speak to them and you find out what you can unlock by gaining reputation with them, and they all have some really cool stuff that's worth getting. And there's also the bounty master, who's called Feng, and you can speak to him to get a bounty, and he'll assign you. It's basically a task where you say, "Oh, I want to gain reputation with whichever faction, let's say Seren," and he'll assign you a task for Seren to go and kill one of the other factions.
Right.
And you have to go and either get kill count or kill the general, because he counts as 25 in the task. And then once you complete that, you get reputation for that faction you chose. So that's a really good way of gaining rep.
And is that a constantly repeatable task, or is that daily?
Yeah,
or?
so it's basically a daily task, but we've made it so that if I come and do my task, one day, and then I can't come back for another few days, the tasks will stack up to 5. So if I miss anywhere up to 5 days, I can come back and I'll have my 5 dailies that I missed. So we don't punish people for missing each day, but they won't go any higher than 5.
Obviously, this is a successor to God Wars Dungeon 1. So what are the parallels, what are the learnings we've made from the first set and that we've brought forward to God Wars Dungeon 2, to the Heart of Gielinor?
I mean, as Raman touched on earlier, it's sort of like the first place where people go to do their PvE and sort of it's their first kind of foray into bossing almost. And we wanted to provide a slightly higher level, higher risk, higher reward version of that experience.
Right.
Sort of just a more modern version of it.
A progression, a natural progression.
Yeah, so Mod Ollie was talking earlier about the kill count stuff that we've got. So we have got kill count just like in God Wars 1, except this time round it persists across leaving the dungeon, whereas God Wars 1 didn't. This time you're paying for an hour of bossing. So you pay for an hour of a boss instance.
Right.
So all of the bosses in God Wars Dungeon 2 are instance. There's no overworld versions of them.
Yeah.
So what you do is you pay your 40 KC up front for an hour's worth of bossing, which means that you're not penalised for going in and then realising, I've forgotten this and I need to go do a bank run, and then, I've got to come back in and get my KC again. So it's that hour period is what you've got is what you purchase with your kill count this time around. So we looked at God Wars 1 and saw the things that a lot of the kind of spirit of it and took it forwards, and then we've kind of iterated on that to make those systems and the mechanics from God Wars 1 more interesting and more accessible.
We got the multiplier as well, so we tried to make kill count more interesting by having sort of a momentum that you build up. So the more you kill, the more your multiplier goes up and the more kill count you earn for each one.
Right,
so if you're killing things in quick succession, you're building up, and it's just more fun, and you've got a little indicator of what. So it goes from 100% to 300%, and it's sort of like there's a little animation each time it goes up, so each kill should feel a little bit like, you're building up your momentum. So that's one improvement we tried to make. And
as RuneScape players, we all love it when numbers go up.
Exactly.
It's all about making numbers go up.
One of our learnings from developing RuneScape.
Was there anything from God Wars Dungeon 1 that we didn't carry forward? Any lessons that we wanted to avoid doing this time?
Well, I mean, the main one is the overworld versions of the bosses. So
Yeah.
The reason that we've instanced all the bosses this time around is it actually gives us as developers, when we're designing and implementing the bosses, it gives us a lot more freedom to play with more interesting mechanics. So we can do things such as the Vindictor and Gorvek fight. We've got huge lines of fire that go across the whole area. We can't do things like that, like huge sort of environmental effects are quite difficult to do outside of instances. So it allows us to do some more interesting things.
And I think as well, hard mode, we learned that hard mode could be done a lot better than it is done in the original God Wars Dungeon, because I don't think the drop rates and stuff are really a good payoff for doing hard mode in the first one.
Yeah.
So we've actually got something we call challenge mode in this one, because we wanted the hard mode to be something that is, well, you get the better drop rates and things because you're doing it, it's a harder mode. You can't just go in with a ton of people like you can on the normal mode. So we made it so that it's solo only, and we added in additional mechanics and things like that, cranked up the stats, and then we've adjusted all the drop rates and things as a result as well. There were a few things we wanted to get in with it, which we didn't have time for, like achievements.
Yeah.
But that is something that, potentially we could add in the future. So we're pretty happy with being able to get challenge mode in as an additional layer of difficulty on top of the normal modes.
Okay. So I understand that the bosses, there has been a deliberate attempt to make them in very different styles and build very different animations for the different bosses.
Yeah, we wanted to give them very clear different personalities for each one. So, for example, Grigorovich, I said that one right?
Grigorovich?
Yeah,
I don't know, you kind of mumbled it. You might have been right.
That dude. His idea from the very concept was he was going to be sort of like a mannequin or a puppet, sort of controlled by Sliske. So he's got a very loose nature to his movements. It's very sort of sloped back. But at the same time, because he has the mask, we wanted to sort of have some very slow movements combined with a very blank expression. Sort of gives you an idea of that you can't really tell what's going on behind that mask in his head, which makes it a little bit more unnerving when he does his very sort of quick attacks with his knives. With that, we put that into the environment as well, so it gives it a whole different sort of tone. Compare that with the Twin Furies, who their core mechanic is pretty much there's two of them. We wanted them to feel like it's not just one character duplicated, so they have their own different personalities, their different attacks, but at the same time they can still join forces, because at the heart of it they are twins. They're sort of connected. It's not just, I'm fighting two separate bosses. So there is that element that we've tied into them there. It kind of works quite nicely when you compare that to, I can't really think of another boss off the top of my head which has got two different NPCs, but it works really well and pretty uniquely, I think.
Okay.
The way that Vindictor and Gorvek worked was quite cool, because you've got the Dragon Rider and the dragon.
Yeah.
And obviously a Dragon Rider's not a Dragon Rider if they don't ride a dragon.
Yeah.
And I was working with Stu to see how we could get that to work, sort of like with kind of like engine limitation stuff that we've got, and it's actually all one NPC. And Stu did an awesome job with sort of having kind of like faked bones on the NPCs, and there's sort of like two separate models, and all the animations are actually all on the one NPC, aren't they?
Yeah, so it all kind of ties together. So you have Vindictor on her own, then Gorvek flies down, and then it is just one NPC, which makes it feel a lot more unified. So they're fighting as an actual unit, as opposed to, again, two separate NPCs, but they've got a very special sort of connection, different relationship to other bosses, which gives that whole other level of personality to those NPCs.
The best bits are when like Vindictor mounts or like unmounts the dragon, and it's really sort of seamless, which is something we normally struggle to achieve. But then obviously the final boss we've got is Helwyr, who's actually was the last one we designed, because we had the other three and it was like, okay, we've got one's quite humanoid, okay, two are twins, they're pretty humanoid really, and then we got Dragon Rider's we got the dragon, but Dragon Rider's pretty humanoid as well. they're pretty close to human, really. So we were like, okay, this fourth one, we want something that's big and scary, and it just intimidates you with its size and stuff like that. So we designed this big sort of wolf, bear, stag thing, which is just like, it's a really unusual sort of, even just silhouette, and then just the animations that Stu's applied to it sort of, when I was designing the mechanics, I was like, I want this to be sort of thrashing around and really getting in your face, and just, you want to run away from it. And that gave Stu a lot of fun, sort of animating these big thrashing, like clawing animations, which are really
real sense of the wild that
Yes.
creature kind of encompasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also really, like I said, it's like really different to the other three. So like in total, we have a really nice collection of bosses. Like no one is like identical to the other. We've managed to sort of cover our bases quite a lot within just a small range of 4.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that God Wars 1 did quite well as well. Is it like he's got the 4 bosses, but none of them felt like the same as any of the others. And and that was something that was quite important to us, was to make sure that we had the 4 faction structure, but again, it was trying to work out, well, how do we make these bosses not only look different, but act different and all feel different to each other.
And sort of really representative of their factions as well.
Okay.
You just don't want one boss which is effectively the same as another, but this has got a Zamorak skin to it, because obviously that wouldn't be in keeping with how versatile God Wars 1 is. So I think we've managed to pull that one off pretty well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so how does the Heart of Gielinor and God Wars Dungeon 2 fit into the lore of the game? How does it fit in lore-wise?
Mod Ramen of the lore forums.
Of the lore forums. Well, so as opposed to the first God Wars Dungeon, where it's a battle that's been rolling on for years, this is sort of a new thing that's just been discovered, in a sense, due to seismic activity in the desert.
Yeah.
The entrance has been uncovered, so these 4 factions have all realised what it is, what's down there, and they've all rushed towards it. So it's fairly new. It's not been raging on for years. So when you go down there, you'll see wooden structures that aren't completely ruined. They've been freshly built, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And I hear talk of something called the Tales.
Yes.
That people should make themselves familiar with.
So most people should have seen this already. We released this at the start of the month. It was the first God Wars 2 thing we released to sort of, get the hype train out of the station, basically. And it was a new format we were trying out to tell this lore. So you sort of go around and collect these memories, which you can then view as cutscenes. And obviously that tells the story of the backstory of each of these generals. So we knew that with God Wars 1, those generals have gone on to be used in different quests, become part of all the storylines, and become really quite iconic characters.
Yeah.
So that was at the forefront of our minds, trying to create characters that really resonate with people, and they want to spend a lot of time with them, and maybe they can be used in future storylines. So we spent a lot of time sort of figuring out how they could each have their own rivalries. So even if their gods sort of, died in Sliske's endgame or something like that, then the generals would still have a reason to be there in the dungeon fighting on. So they each have their own intertwining rivalries and stuff as well. And that's what Tales of the God Wars is about, sort of discovering their origin stories and how these rivalries came about.
So if you're a listener and you haven't picked it up, you really should.
Yeah, definitely.
Go and have a look.
I mean, it seems to have gone down quite well, so
yeah,
I would recommend it. And obviously, as Mod Ramen said, you get your teletab item from that as well, so it's
very useful,
mechanically valuable as well.
Okay, so before we all rush off to await the release, I have one last question for each of you. What's your favourite bit of the work you've done? What's your favourite bit of the God Wars Dungeons?
For me, it's probably seeing these couple of yellow and blue cubes as Deg's environment. All the developers' environments, they start off as these blue and yellow cubes, and then it turns into something absolutely incredible. Glowing things, floating things.
So it's been watching it grow.
Yeah, watching it grow just from the very start to the finished product we have now.
It's so hard to pick a single bit of it, because I feel like the whole thing has come together really nicely into like one cohesive thing, which I think we're all really proud of. But I'll pick something that's quite niche, I guess. There's basically, in the Hellware fight, there's these he sort of activates these mushrooms. And
there's quite a lot of laughter trying not to be expressed on the sofa.
Because over the last, when Stu did the animations for these mushrooms, I couldn't shut up about how much I love them and how much I love my little mushrooms in the fight.
Yeah,
because
it was the first time though, and it was like, oh man, I love these mushrooms. These mushrooms are so like. Has everyone seen these mushrooms?
I had to show everyone.
There was a quiet time in the office where everyone was quiet, and all of a sudden, the Ollie burst out with, "I'm so happy after seeing these mushrooms."
They just brought me such joy. But basically, there's the mechanic in the fight is the mushrooms sort of they start small, and then he'll activate them and they grow. And then in challenge mode, there's a mechanic where more of them all sort of grow at once.
Right.
And just watching these little mushrooms sort of grow out of the ground, like, the animation is just so good. And it's a really small thing to pick, but that's probably like my
No,
favorite.
I understand that. Sometimes small things.
Exactly.
I think what I really like is how we've managed to like tie a lot of stuff back to God Wars 1. I think actually one of my favourite things is something we've not actually touched on is the rewards we're giving from God Wars Dungeon 2 are like God armours. And they're very much modelled after the god swords that come from God Wars 1. So you had the swords with the hilts and the blades that you kind of piece together and you build your reward.
Yeah.
And in God Wars 2, we've got a very similar thing, but this time we've gone with like god armour. So you get the kind of armour piece and then you get one of the god crests from the faction, you piece them together and you make your god armour out of that. So I think that was quite cool.
It's hard to think, really, because, I mean, in general, I'm just so impressed with how much stuff we've actually managed to do in 3 months. It's been like really intense for everyone.
Demon Twins backflips.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's going to be one of my favourite things, actually. If I could pick one thing, it's definitely the Twin Furies with one of their sort of attacks where they sort of carve across the air. And we did some sort of sweet backflips.
Yeah.
Front flips. Pretty much it was all quite small pieces, but they all sort of tied together. We sewed them into the code, and it also worked like amazingly well, just how fluid everything moves.
Yeah, we were trying to like figure it out how we would make this sort of they slice across the room and then like wall plant, bounce off to another wall and then slice across again, and it's like how do we fit these animations in? And when we chop them up and put them into the code, they just work. And it's so lovely when stuff does that, and it just looks so cool as well.
Yeah.
So
it's lovely when things just come together like
exactly.
that.
Yeah, well, there was a similar thing with the ground fire that we've got in the Vindictor fight as well. Like we had to try and work out a way that, because everyone knows about our server ticks, how we can get something to sort of like smoothly go from like one side of the room to the other with the fires kind of like slowly picking up. And myself and Dave, we sat down and we had this idea of how we could kind of get the fire to smoothly go from one end of the room to the other, and we kind of put it in. It just worked. It's really satisfying when that happens.
Sort of staggers out, and it looks really nice. Yeah. It makes it so much smoother than like you'd have like believed with like the tick system.
Yeah, it's rather than just everything just like being dumped down straight away. We've managed to sort of work around that and do some interesting stuff that makes it look a lot nicer.
Brilliant. Okay, so just one. Although I said that was the last question, I have just one more. How long do you reckon it's going to be before somebody kills their first boss in?
It will be super
fast.
fast.
Super quick. You reckon it'll be super quick?
Because we've gone for sort of like mid to high level, and we want it to be accessible. The top PVMers and people with sort of tier 90 gear and stuff will go in, and they won't be too challenged. Hopefully, challenge mode they'll find a bit more challenging. But I would expect someone to get their first. There'll be people that go in and kill it.
So
pretty quick.
The office will be full of live streams as everybody's watching as well.
I can't wait for that.
Well, I mean, the non-challenge bosses you can go in a group as well. So no doubt there'll be big steamrolling groups of sort of like 50 people all going in at once and completely stomping them. But then that's something that happened in God Wars 1. That's just, it's quite fun to just go in there and stomp bosses every now and then.
One thing I did want to mention, just if that was
the last question, go on.
It's because we've done quite a few live streams and we've done the BTS and stuff, and we haven't mentioned it anywhere else. But obviously, last year was a big player power was like a big focus to us. Yeah, and basically, I just wanted to let people know that with this, we've done a lot of listening to players and stuff right from the beginning, where we were deciding the factions. We put out Twitter polls to see who people would be okay with, and if we could get away with using Zamorak and Zaros again, because they made so much sense to us. And then, we sort of tested the water and the players were okay with it. So that gave us a go ahead. And then very recently, so right up until the end, we were on a live stream and we said, we said there were no requirements in at the moment for the bosses, and
Yeah.
we decided to straw poll the Twitch chat, and it was overwhelmingly in favour of putting skill requirements in. So we went ahead and did that. And there's various other things as well. We really do listen to the players with everything we're doing. So I just wanted to sort of get.
And when we release it, the feedback will be vitally important to any changes we look to make.
Well, I mean, even though we've technically only been sort of actively developing it since sort of Christmas sort of time, God Wars Dungeon 2 was announced like back at RuneFest last year, and ever since then we've been thinking about it. It's always been in the back of our minds.
It was an enormous shout when it was announced at RuneFest 2. That was a biggie.
But I mean, we've been testing the waters with stuff like since then, and sort of kind of just looking around at what everyone's reaction and stuff was to the announcement and things, and seeing like what they wanted to see and stuff like that. So it's been, even though the development has been sort of shorter than the amount of time that we've actually been thinking about it.
Right, to the Heart of Gielinor then.
Yes.
It looks awesome in NXT as well, it's worth noting.
Go and have a look at NXT, and if you'd like to say goodbye now.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.